along with that, that you don't necessarily have to travel too far to get to a safer place. In terms of shelters, what does that mean as far as, you know, what's available and even where people could find out where there are open shelters?
Sure. You can go to floridadisaster.org/info to find out where the shelters are. We have shelters open in every county. You don't need to leave your county to find a shelter. We have special needs shelter. We have pet shelter. We have other shelters. We have so far 9,000 volunteer, 8,000 volunteers plus the American Red Cross is adding 1,000 volunteers for our shelters. We do need a total of 17,000 volunteers. You can volunteer to work in our shelters, help distribute food. You can go to volunteerflorida.org to find places to do that. But we will have shelters for you. And if you can't get out, if you call the state emergency hotline, we can make sure you know we can help you get out. So we're going to try to do everything we can to make sure everybody has their fuel. But if you have a hard time evacuating, if you call the state emergency hotline, we can help you get out. And we're going to do it. The keys are already, mandatory evacuation for everybody there. Well, you'll see more evacuations as we go along. Follow the evacuation orders. I'm going to do everything I can. I love every citizen in my state. I want to keep every citizen in my state safe.
And Governor, one quick question for you. There's been a lot of commotion, a lot of people scared about running out of gas and water. How's that refueling process of getting those supplies into the state been, and are there still plenty enough for the residents who are going to stick out the storm?
The water and the food, the retailers, I'm talking to them, they're replenishing shelves. So what we're hearing right now we're not hearing that as much as that there were shortages as much today as we had yesterday. So the retailers are restocking their shelves. With regard to the fuel, we're doing everything we can make sure we get more fuel in. We've got 3 tankers coming into Port Tampa today. Each has about 1.2 million gallons. You can go to Gas Buddy, go to their app, and it'll tell you where you can find fuel. So go to the Gas Buddy app, and you can download and find where you can find fuel. I'm providing law enforcement escort services to all the carriers that are taking fuel from our ports to our retailers so they can get back and forth fast, because we're selling a lot of gas right now. I'm also asking everybody to think about how much gas you need. Be considerate of your neighbor. If you're going to shelter in county, you probably don't need to fill up your tank. Leave that maybe for somebody that's going to shelter outside the county somewhere. So we're doing everything we can to keep people safe. My job is to try to make sure everybody takes this seriously. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. We think it's going to hit the East Coast, but you never know. These things can move. I want everybody in my state to be prepared.
All right, Florida Governor Rick Scott, I can't tell you how appreciative we are of your time. We know you're busy, obviously, so we thank you so much for the good information. We'll reinforce all those messages, important ones. If you are going to shelter in place, maybe not necessarily have to fill your tank up, think of their neighbors. You can see right now, even out towards Tampa, the traffic is building and people are taking to their cars and getting away from the coast.
Yeah, exactly. And again, a lot of people, maybe thinking they need to drive all the way to Georgia and South Carolina, but that's not advised, because they're need to be as aware and are in just as much trouble as Florida is. So you don't necessarily have to travel these long distances to go out of harm's way. You want to get to a safe spot that you can bear out this storm.
Yes, you can hide from the wind. You've got to run from the water, though. We are concerned about the storm surge. And again, obviously, West Coast, East Coast, South Florida, we're still in it right now. I want to give you the latest update on Hurricane Irma right now. And you can see the 5 p.m. advisory is in. And no surprise, still a Category 5 storm with max winds of 175 miles per hour.
I mean, this is a monster. Pressure really has been stable all day at around 920, 921, 922 millibars. So as you watch that pressure drop, that's when you really see those winds uptick. So although the winds may have come down from 185, this is just as beastly as it was before. And we want to bring in the latest with hurricane specialist Carl Parker with the latest update.
Yeah, a couple of changes here with this 5 o'clock forecast package. One is that Cuba is now in a hurricane warning along the northern coast of Cuba there. And also the forecast track has shifted just a little bit. So this is a response to that European model run we talked about. The European model, which looked very much like the GFS, bringing the core of the storm right into South Florida earlier today, or at least the early runs of the GFS and last night's run of the European model. The European model from this morning, which we don't get until the afternoon, showed a shift to the west. And so the Hurricane Center also trimming the eastward extent of the track right in here just a little bit and bringing it a little farther to the west right in here. So that's basically moving that center line. This is basically showing you the forecast, the average forecast error, and they've moved that center line just a little to the west now. Now that would still be, if the storm came right down that center line, that would still be absolutely devastating for South Florida. So there's really no wholesale change in the thinking there, but you've got this wiggling that's going on with the models where some of them moved a little farther to the east between yesterday and today, and then just today we saw a little bit of a shift to the west in some of the modeling. And so that's the kind of thing that we'll continue to see as the models sort of grapple with the larger pattern in the upper low that's settling into the southeast that's helping to guide this system along. And again, as mentioned, where exactly the core of the storm goes is going to have a lot to do with what types of impacts we see in which locations. If the storm were to pass a little to the west of that center line, that would be devastating for the Keys, for Southwest Florida, as well as Bradenton, Sarasota, Tampa, and up into Orlando. That would bring that most dangerous core of the storm up and across those areas. Now, if it passed right along the center line here, that would be awful in South Florida, and then a lot of the East Coast as well, and also up into Orlando potentially. Whereas if it were a little farther to the east, that would still be very bad for a lot of the east coast of Florida. It looks like it's a tad less likely that we'll see the storm just wholly offshore with the eye wall and everything completely offshore. So, all of the scenarios, as I've been saying all afternoon, all of the scenarios are bad in this case, just a matter of who gets the very worst of the storm. And also, if the storm is a little more offshore, then it would stay stronger longer, and that would increase the impacts in parts of Georgia and also in South Carolina. Right now, they've brought this to 90 miles per hour as it is coming in. What's going to be happening here is there's almost no wind shear at all as the storm is going up and across the state of Florida. There's no wind shear right now. The shear is really not going to increase substantially right as it's coming up through Florida. And so that's not holding the storm back. Land interaction would have an impact, and that could happen to some extent in Cuba. Certainly it could happen to great extent in Florida, especially if it comes up through the middle of the state. And then eventually there is going to be wind shear, stronger winds coming right across the southeast just like that. And those stronger winds will shear the system as it is coming in, but it's not going to be enough, most likely, to weaken it substantially as it moves into the coast. You notice that they've brought it to 90 miles per hour as it gets into this position in Georgia, but the assumption there is that the center line is basically onshore right in here. And again, if that track were to shift a little farther out to the east and the center of the storm, the core of the storm, were more out over the open water, that would have an impact on the intensity of the storm. So where exactly it goes is going to have a lot to do with the intensity and who sees the very worst of the storm. Then comes up here and really slows down as it gets up into that mountainous terrain there. So there's going to be a flash flood concern with the storm as well. Here's the latest visible satellite imagery, and this thing is just terrifying. It's a monster. As you look at it on the visible satellite imagery, there's a closer look. Look at the depth there in that eye. You can see the very rapidly rotating eye. You notice it's not perfectly clear. There's some cloud in here, but some clearing as well. You can see what is called that stadium effect right there. The sun's getting lower, and it's shining on the right side of that eye wall. And that most dangerous part of the storm, it's the eye wall, it's that ring of storms around the eye. That is now coming right into Salt Key here, as well as into Coburn Town in Grand Turk, on Grand Turk Island. So that area is just getting crushed by strong wind and surge. And there's a lot of low-lying terrain there. And we're looking for surge of 15 to 20 feet in the Turks and Caicos. Also coming into South Caicos before very long. In fact, there's the eye wall right in there. That's just about ready to move into South Caicos and Coburn Harbor, which is right there. So these islands are getting the very worst of the storm, much the same way that the Leeward Islands did, Barbuda, as well as St. Martin, St. Bart's, Anguilla, and also the British Virgin Islands. I think the devastation here is going to be total across this region, unfortunately. Storm surge forecast showing you 15 to 20 feet of surge in those islands, and then 5 to 10 feet of surge in South Florida. That is really significant surge associated with this incredibly powerful storm. Chris, Maria, back to you.
All right, thanks, Carl. And hurricane watches are up along parts of South Florida ahead of Hurricane Irma.
And that includes coastal areas in Broward County. The county's Director of Emergency Management, Miguel Ascaruns, is on the phone. Sir, thank you for taking time with us. Let's start with, are people leaving areas under voluntary evacuation right now?
Yes, we actually started our voluntary evacuations yesterday to allow for people to either stay with family or friends, so that we could follow up today with our mandatory evacuation areas east of Federal Highway or US 1, including our barrier island. So that went into effect as of noon today, and we did open up 14 shelters for anyone evacuating that could not stay with family or friends, and we also have a pet-friendly shelter open. Right now, our shelters, our census is indicating about 1,000 people. Not as much as we expected, but I don't have a firmer count, if you will, on how many have actually evacuated. We continue to push the message, though. We're doing 2 or 3 press conferences a day. Notification system, sending out 2 or 3 of those alerts per day now, and we want people to really be off the roadways by Friday evening in the event we see some tropical storm force wind conditions here in Broward County.
And Director, do you know of any problems with gas or food shortages across Broward County, Fort Lauderdale Metro?
Yes, we've had some reported over the past couple of days. Fuel, supplies, demand going to the gas stations at once. And the matter of
and I live right under the ocean. I live by the ocean.
A lot of the fuel for South Florida. It's just a matter of the tanker truck. Time period that takes you to load up and get over to the gas station.
They pull a fucking cat.
So as of today, I believe the governor is now providing law enforcement escorts to the fuel tankers.
I don't know. That goes
between the demand and supply issues.
Man, we home, Joel. We home like fuck.
Thank you so much for your time. Again, talking about voluntary evacuations versus mandatory.